I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
The Toronto Maple Leafs down 2-1 in their first round series against the Boston Bruins. Game 4 up on Saturday in Toronto. Siege, what do you think the Leafs need to do to tie this series? What did you think of them in Game 3? Let's talk about Boston. Let's try to deconstruct what we saw last night between these two teams.
Yeah, I think that what jumps out to me is that the Leafs have had a lot of success at 5-on-5 in the series, but they're getting killed in specialty teams. And, especially these last two games where there's really not a whole lot between them. Even Game 1, I think that the pace of play was similar, but obviously ends up a 5-1 Bruins win. I think that there'll be a lot of focus on the Toronto end. I mean, on the execution with their specialty teams, on not taking too many penalties to begin with. And maybe the most important thing, and this isn't too sexy, is that there's an extra day before they have to play Game 4. And the reason that's significant is, it's my understanding that the expectation is William Nylander will play Game 4 for the Leafs. He hasn't appeared yet in the series. Austin Matthews played on Wednesday night through an illness. He missed the morning skate. That was a full team skate other than himself. And, having this break in the series probably comes at the right time, given that unquestionably, especially when we're talking about the Leafs power play, part of, what made it successful through big chunks of the season was having Nylander and a healthy Matthews or rested Matthews on that top unit. So some of it, I think, will be approach, mindset, i.e. not engaging in the bullshit, as Matthew Nye said, when it comes to Brad Marchand. Some of it will be down to execution and sure, tactical adjustments when it comes to killing penalties. And then, just getting Nylander back in the lineup, having Matthews be closer to 100% than he was in Game 3. I think all those things, should help the Leafs, but they have to go out and do it. It's a close series. It's a tight series. I saw Brad Marchand, the cameras caught him saying this is over in 5 after he scored into an empty net. I still think this is a 6 and probably 7 game series. It just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot differentiating the teams, and that's how it should be. We're all going to get our bang for our buck by the end of the next 8-9 days.
Absolutely, we all need that for the sake of our jobs. Brad Marchand, I'm glad you brought him up. And the clip you're referencing, obviously, after that goal he scored in the third period, a lot of lip reading being done. So you're on the side that says that's for sure what he said. This series is going to end in 5.
That's what it looked like to me. What's the counter? I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time on it. I just watched it a couple times, and that's what I thought he said. But it was what's the alternate ending that's out there?
I don't know if there is an alternate ending. It's just, I think you always have to be careful with whenever you read lips. That being said, there were a lot of people who thought that's what he said. And if you look at his lips,
there were a lot of big accounts claiming that that's what he said too.
Yeah,
so.
It does look like it. I'm not saying he didn't do it. I'm just saying we're lip reading here. So you always have to take that. You always have to have that shred of doubt just in case it's not what he said. But it really did look like that's what he said.
Well, and it's not an outlandish thing to say. He's expressing confidence. He's, how you respond within these games and series is such a big part of, what happens. Like the Bruins went down in this game. They got ahead, the Leafs tied it, and then they scored, 28 seconds later. So, I mean, there's a lot of fight in that team. I think that, if there's been a knock on the Leafs sometimes is they've gone away in certain playoff series. So I'm sure I think there's a lot of head games going on with Marchand. I mean, he's basically doing whatever he wants out there. He's drawn penalties in each of the games, the 3 games in the series. Obviously he's contributing offensively. He had 3 assists in the first 2 games and then gets 2 goals in Game 3. So, I mean, he's having a hell of a time. This is, he feeds off your tears, Leaf Nation. So, this is what you expect for him. And obviously you can even tell Sheldon Keefe is getting agitated by him, just with the way he handled a post-game question, saying he's world-class as a player and sort of in his behavior. He's elite. It's an art, the way he draws penalties, the way he's taking out Bertuzzi's legs and not getting called for his own penalties. I mean, it would be difficult to have any read other than the fact that he's under the skin of the Leafs to this point in the series, and they're going to have to find a way to address that. I think, Toronto obviously wants to be a bit of an initiator physically. This is a different looking Leafs team. If there was the loudest part in the building last night, maybe other than the goals, was when Ryan Reeves threw a couple big hits on shifts in the first period. And the Leafs are trying to sort of engage in that way, but obviously when you go too far, it's burning them because their penalty kill hasn't been sharp, and their power play, to be honest, especially if you look at the power plays in Game 3, the best penalty killer was Jeremy Swayman. It wasn't as though Boston has figured out how to completely neutralize chances, but the goaltending was pretty strong there. So, I think that there's a lot to work on or dig into, or I guess there's a lot of it, sort of what I would call small adjustments that can be made that could, change things, because, when you're carrying the play of 5-on-5 in a playoff series, that's usually a good sign, because, it's not often we see a ton of penalties called, but quite frankly, the Leafs had 5 power plays in Game 3 and they didn't score a goal. So, they did have opportunities in that game and they didn't make good on them. And that's probably the main reason we're sitting here this morning talking about them being down 2-1 instead of up 2-1.
Yeah, in terms of adjustments, there's no bigger adjustment they could make to their power play than by reinserting William Nylander into the lineup. So if he's able to play Game 4, that's obviously going to help.
Yeah, and unless something completely unexpected happens, and look, we're all day-to-day in the playoffs, so I guess that's always possible.
We're all day-to-day in life.
That's true, but my understanding is that there's a plan in place for him to play on Saturday. He's now skated that we know of 3 times in the last 4 days. There's still a couple more days before that game is played. And so, again, unless there's some kind of setback or something that's unexpected, I think that the signs are pointing to him re-entering the lineup. And that's going to be a huge boost for the Leafs. I mean, what's the same old story again? I see everyone dusting off the numbers. It's only one game in the last 10 or 11, is it, in the playoffs where they've scored more than 3 goals. It's basically been 2 or less for a long stretch, I guess 10 games now in playoff competition. Adding your second leading scorer back to the lineup, and then also getting your leading scorer back to health, after kind of a 24-hour illnessy type of situation, there's no way that isn't going to at least better set you up offensively. Again, no guarantees of success. I think Swayman is a huge factor in this series that is really making his presence felt, and whether there's debates, they switch back and forth. Like, I think they would be absolutely nuts to switch away from this guy, at least until, look, if he has a poor game, maybe you look at it later down the road, but the way he's played, the fact he's 5-0 against Toronto this season alone, I wouldn't overthink that decision if I was in Jim Montgomery's shoes.
Me neither, but they do have a unique way of going about things with their goaltending. What did you think of the crowd yesterday? I know we kind of brought that up as a topic earlier in the week, and then it's now coming to the forefront again. There's a tweet from Joe Bowen going around. The idea of going to any sporting event to support the home team is to be proactive. Give the team energy when they need it, not sitting down waiting to be reactive. The players can't say it, but I will. Tonight's crowd was, in all caps, very disappointing.
I mean, it's funny. Look, I haven't been doing a tour around Canada like producer Nick.
Yes, that's true.
I certainly caught those games on TV. I mean, Vancouver looked electric. Edmonton's been loud. Winnipeg's a loud building at the best of times. You get into a whiteout situation, a 7-6 game in their opener against Colorado. I mean, I think the facts are the facts that Toronto's crowd isn't quite as lively. I'm going to say, though, I didn't think it was maybe as bad as Joe, but like, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And maybe my bar is set too low. I mean, maybe it's just like, I'm not expecting much more. So, I thought that there was good energy at the start of the game. As I mentioned, that one shift towards the end of the first period where the Leafs were throwing some big hits and it felt like there was a lot of energy behind the teams. There were points where they spiked up, but, I suppose by the end of the game, it wasn't where you'd want it to be. I mean, look, I just don't know how it changes, because the people in the building aren't by and large going to change. I mean, not that it's the same 19,000 fans every night, but it's more or less the same kind of thing. And let's just call it as it is. The tickets are freaking beyond the average person's price point. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, not only are they beyond the average person's price point, like, they're hard to get your hands on unless you're paying even more and going to a scalper or one of the secondary market websites. But even if you're paying face value, it's just like, I don't even know what they are. I think I saw someone put on Twitter that they're $600 lower bowl. Like,
I saw someone put that in the responses of Joe's tweet. Yeah.
I'm in a pretty privileged spot in my life. Like, I'm not sure I'd be in a spot to be shelling that over for a playoff game. So, you know, I don't know where to direct the blame here, because, you know, it's just very unique. It's a team owned by very powerful corporations. It's in a largest city, the sort of business hub of Canada. A lot of the tickets are corporate based, and you know, I just think that this is the outcome of that, the downstream effect of it. I also don't think it's that different from the past, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, the price point has gone up, but trust me, in 1992, the tickets seemed expensive for the people at the time too. So, you know, it's a shame that you couldn't have some of the crowd inside mingling in Maple Leaf Square, eating the sushi, and then bring the people from Maple Leaf Square into the lower bowl. Like, if you could do a 1-for-1 trade, I think you get a little bit more of the desired effect. But, you know, I guess it is what it is. I didn't think the crowd was. What's that?
You said sushi? That you could eat sushi at Scotiabank Arena?
I think so. That's sort of like always the joke. It's funny. I really like sushi, so I'm not trying to drag.
I like
sushi
too. I didn't know.
I don't want sushi to catch a stray bullet in this conversation. I'm just saying it's sort of like the idea is, you know, that the old time sports thought is you're going and eating a hot dog, right, or whatever, or you're eating some sort of junk food, fries, pizza. But you know, I mean, at Scotiabank, it's like the sushi and the. You know, the foie gras or something like. I don't know.
Oh, I understand the reference now.
I think the implication is it's just la-di-da, you know, a little fancy.
Yeah. I understand you now. I understand you now. Go ahead.
But yeah, so maybe we could have like a little dinner party in Maple Leaf Square and then have the true fans that are standing out there with their faces painted and dressing up in rat costumes with Marchand jerseys and all the stuff that I saw on social media from Maple Leaf Square, including my nephew was down there. I think
cool.
One of the games in Boston, he went down with his buddies to Maple Leaf Square to watch the game. So yeah, it's let's face it, it's a younger crowd out there. It's different. And I just don't see how it changes. Quite honestly, I don't see a fix. I don't think, and Joe, I know Joe Bowen's heart's in the right place. He's, you know, very passionate supporter of the team, longtime play-by-play voice. But like him calling them out, I just don't know if it's going to, I don't think it's going to change too much. I mean, maybe a little bit. Who knows? Joe's got the power. He's got the passion. So
that's true.
But I should say, I don't think it was a terrible atmosphere. It's just, I don't think it doesn't match what you're seeing elsewhere. And I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine this, but even if there's a Stanley Cup game played in Toronto, like the tickets aren't getting cheaper. Like, I just don't know that the circumstance, I don't know what changes, I guess, is the thing I don't see.
By the way, the barbecue idea, that should be a free idea for Maddie Smith, aka Mad Dog, who was going around Maple Leaf Square with a mic, interviewing fans and asking them who Steve Dangle was. That's a free idea. They should totally do it.
Oh man, I missed that.
Yeah, there's some video of that's going around. I presumed it was after game 1 or game 2, or just one of the games in this series. But yeah, definitely really fun. You should check that out on the SDPN pages. One other player we should talk about in this series, I would love to know your thoughts about Mitch Marner. Earlier this week, a really interesting cover from the Toronto Sun, the invisible Leaf. When Buds need him most, Mitch Marner pulling his usual playoff disappearing act. I thought he was a little bit more visible in game 3. What do you think of Mitch Marner and how he's played so far?
You know, I think some of the reaction is a little over the top. And in fact, Steve Simmons wrote the story. If you read the story, I think it's actually a pretty fair and balanced account of where Mitch Marner is at. It's just, you know, he works for a tabloid. They, you know, they put the cover that they did. Like, the cover is ridiculous, but that's kind of what I expect from tabloids in moments like this. The story itself, I didn't think was that unfair. And I don't think the discussion around Marner's been that unfair either, for the most part, locally, that I've seen. I mean, probably it's veering into the absurd and obscene on social media, but certainly among the media that I call my colleagues, I haven't seen anything too vicious or, you know, the facts are the facts. He's paid to help produce offense. He didn't have, a breakthrough moment in those first two games, although he would have had an assist in the second game on the high stick goal by Tyler Bertuzzi. Made a really nice pass on Matthew Knies' goal last night. And, it's a playoff hockey is a tough for someone like Mitch Marner, the way he plays. He loves to hold on to the puck, obviously, sets up his teammates. Like you're not knowing, he's not a power forward, right, by definition. And so I think some of that gets, people are watching and they get frustrated watching him try to do it. But, I got to say, I really he's spoken a couple times to the media during the series, and at times in the past that hasn't gone well. Like I think he's been very sort of mature about it all. Seems very calm, and I certainly thought he played better in game 3. So, let's see where it ends up. It's a tough time of year, and part of it is the noise. Part of it is the discussion around these things when you don't put up the points you're paid to or expected to. But he's far from the first in that situation. He won't be the last. And I think to call him an invisible man is maybe a little bit strong. He's not invisible, but he hasn't been a game breaker yet. And the Leafs are going to need that at some point in the playoffs for them to have a long run.
I think still one playoff goal in his last 12 at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, he's more of a setup man, if we're being honest, right? And in this case, he's not playing with Matthews. Let's see how the lines shake out when Nylander's back. Let's see how that power play, some power play points would help someone like Mitch Marner, right? I mean, a big part of what he does is control the puck on the power play, set up his teammates, find open lanes. I mean, his vision is next level. And so I still think there's plenty of opportunity here for him to flip the script. For me, it's not just goals. It's, being part of positive offensive sequences. And defensively, I think he's held his own so far. So look I'm not, by no means am I saying he's beyond criticism. I don't think that that's the case. Like, I think it's fair to discuss his production, where he's at, what the eye test is telling you in terms of his ability to sort of compete and fight for the tough ice. But, I don't think the full story is written just yet. And I went back, I wrote a story myself this week on it, Julian. Like, Patrick Kane in 2013 had 2 goals through 15 games, and then he scored 7 in the last 8 and won the Conn Smythe, including a double overtime winner in the deciding game of the conference final, had a hat trick. Like there's still time for players like Marner to, just because it starts off not great through 3 games or not the way you'd want, there's still time to completely flip the script in the playoffs. And the truth is, most of the time when a team wins, you almost forget the points by and large. You remember the big moments, you remember the big goals, but the exact totals of who had what without looking them up usually get lost to time. And so I think Marner's committed to being part of a winning team. As I say, I really like what I've seen from him publicly. I mean, I have to point that out and underline it like 3 times, that he's been seems very level-headed through it all to this point, which is a good sign. As recently as last year when they went down to Florida 3-0, he did a media scrum where I just was, shaking my head leaving it, because he was blaming the media for, he's calling noise. I was like, well, there's noise because you're down 3-0 in a playoff series. Like, it's not just noise for noise's sake, right? But anyway, there's definitely signs of growth in the Leafs. What does it matter unless they find a way to win the series? But I've just seen a far more composed team with the start of the series, and they should be. I mean, they've been through it all. It's the 8th time for the core guys. It's not, they kind of know what it's about, and they've got to find a way to accentuate the positive things that they've done in the series and minimize the things that have been working against them. And I think it's there for them, but they got to go do it against a team that's got the heart of a champion. The Bruins have won a ton of games. They've been through even more battles, especially their guys like Marchand and Pasternak and McAvoy and the players that have been there a long time, DeBrusk. And so that's where we're at. It's, as I say, I feel like we're just getting started here, and kind of a weird situation. Not only is there the double off day before game 4, there's 2 more before game 5. So right now we're sitting here and there's 1 game in the next 5 days, which I actually do think works to the team that's more injured's favor. And, Bobby McMahon, who we haven't mentioned, is, I know, working his way back to trying to get in this series. Game 4 isn't on the radar for him, but game 5, maybe game 6, if they can get there, I think it becomes quite possible. And so the Leafs are looking for some reinforcements, and I think they're going to get them, starting with Nylander, a healthier Matthews, and then eventually McMahon.
Who's going to sit for Nylander? I know we talked about that earlier in the week, but do you think it's still going to be Nick Robertson?
I think it's likely to be Robertson. The fourth line has given them some good minutes. It's sort of a weird situation. You're adding a player in and taking someone off the third line, not the fourth line. But, Robertson will be kicking himself. He has had really good looks in game 1 and 2. He had what I call a pretty good look in the third period of game 3. And obviously being a shooter, being a player that's found a way to score. I mean, had he score 1 or 2 of those, then we'd have a really fascinating conversation. I think it'd be a more difficult call. So I would guess Robertson, but that's just my speculation versus any kind of solid information.
Okay. One more thing before we move on to the rest of the playoff picture. What were your thoughts on Jim Montgomery's comments about the scheduling in this series? I'll read the quote that you were able to pull from him. I would have rather been here Thursday, Saturday, if I'm being honest. I think we're spending more time in Toronto than Toronto's spending in Boston, and we're the home team.
I mean, he's just expressing his opinion, right? It was a pretty innocent question, and he gave his truthful answer. I guess what's interesting is that he gave the truth, right? The truth has been hard to find in this series at the coaches' podiums. Both coaches have been guilty of misdirection or maybe just no direction at all, not wanting to give anything away. I can understand it to some degree, but look, look at all the playoff schedules. I mean, there's double off days everywhere. I remember the Leafs had a double off day down 3-0 actually last year in Florida on the road in the same situation as Boston is in terms of them having home ice advantage. I mean, there's nothing unusual about this. I can understand it. There was actually talk, I will say, of game 3 being Thursday night, which would be tonight, and game 4 being Saturday, which would have given the Bruins, an extra day at home before they had to travel up to Toronto. But, those decisions are made by the TV executives and the league executives. And, the schedule is a schedule. And as Sheldon Keefe pointed out, I don't know if he was subtweeting him, but after the game, he said the great thing with the playoffs is the schedule is the same for both teams. I think what he means is during the regular season, you might go play an opponent who's been resting for 3 days and you're on a back-to-back or whatever. There's a lot of different inequalities or what we might call schedule losses built into the regular season. I don't think either team has that excuse when it comes to the playoffs and in any of the 8 series going on right now.
I don't know about you, but if I was Jim Montgomery, I would have taken that quote as a shot, but maybe that just speaks to me as a person. It's a very thinly veiled dig back at those comments.
As I say, it's been an interesting sort of, there's been a lot of sportsmanship at the, whatever you might call it, like mind games or
gamesmanship.
Gamesmanship is better. I said sportsmanship, but yeah, it's been a lot of gamesmanship in this series. Like it's been subtle. It hasn't been like I've covered series where it's just outright gets hostile. And, like even the way Keefe's handling the questions on Marchand, like he's sort of saying it without saying it.
Mm-hmm.
He said earlier a couple days ago, something like, the Bruins players are really good at drawing attention to where an infraction's been called. Like he's sort of saying they're exaggerating or diving. As I've previously stated, I don't mind this stuff. I think it provides a level of color and entertainment to the series around the games, and so I'm here for it.
Absolutely, me too. Let's look at some of the other series, notably the more Canadian teams that are playing the playoffs right now, because the Leafs are trailing in theirs, but every other Canadian team who had a 1-0 series lead and had home ice advantage has lost it at this point. Winnipeg and Colorado are tied, but we'll get to them later. Vancouver and Nashville tied. Edmonton yesterday, they lose in overtime. Wild play where it looked as if it was going to be an icing off a Mikey Anderson pass. Then Quinton Byfield bats it, and then it gets to Anze Kopitar, who beat Stuart Skinner, and now it's a completely different series. I know you got in just in time to watch overtime, but to see that LA and Edmonton are tied at 1 game apiece, I have to admit, I thought it was going to be a cakewalk for Edmonton, but it just goes to show how momentum just does not transition from one game to the next in the playoffs.
No, and the other team's trying to win too. Like I always make that point. Even if one team is deemed to be or thought to be weaker, a little less on paper, it doesn't mean that they don't have sort of the way to will their way through a game to get some bounces. And I mean, the most amazing thing about that Kopitar thing to me is the puck hits him and he's in like full stride. Like I don't even know that you'd have trouble recreating that play. But the beautiful thing, if you're the Kings, is you only had to create it once. It got you winning the series. And, now I would think they're going to go down to LA and try to sort of slow things down a little bit. The Kings blew a lead in game 2. They've managed to escape with it, but I don't think that you want to be running and gunning with the Oilers too much in their shoes. And, I still like Edmonton's chances in the series, but it's going to be a battle. And that's what it should be. I mean, I don't know how many, even the couple 2-0 series that are out there, like I don't know how many of these are going to be over in 4. We just don't see a lot of sweeps these days. So, I think that Edmonton's in a great spot. Stuart Skinner kind of seemed like he owned his part of that game a little bit, just saying like he wasn't as much of a factor as he would have liked to be. And let's see what the games give down in LA. I mean, the thing is Edmonton's playing with sort of a favorites label on them. And so that could be challenging too, especially if they end up falling behind in the series. Like how do they respond? And so I'm happy to see these series, not that I'm cheering for anyone, but have some tension in them, have some doubt. And, it's not going to be easy for any of these teams. That's how it looks. I mean, Vancouver without Demko, Edmonton, if they're not, if Skinner struggles, that certainly wasn't his best game 2. If he has a tough game 3, then what are you doing? I mean, there are questions about these teams, and that's what they got to answer them with their play on the ice.
Absolutely. This episode of The Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. I just want to say, by the way, this is not in the script at all. Still love these. These are incredible. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or they take an unexpected hit, do not sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And if you don't love your shades, you can exchange them for a new pair or return them worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Go to ShadyRays.com right now and use code Johnston for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Johnston, that's the code. 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses, 50% off. All you have to do is use that code Johnston when you hit up ShadyRays.com. Speaking of teams in 2-0 series, the one series I did not expect to be 2-0 at all is Dallas Vegas. Like, I haven't watched it as closely compared to some of the other series in the postseason. That being said, I made the Dallas Stars my Stanley Cup pick. I did not expect them to be down 2-0. I did not expect. I think there's been some times where Jake Oettinger just has not looked like the high level goalie we expect him to be. And Vegas at times they look like they could just be all over Dallas, but Dallas at least has been able to claw back in certain situations. But they're still down 2-0. That I did not expect that series to look the way that it has, and that's a team that's lost home ice advantage in their series.
And they played with $87 million worth of players last night in an $83.5 million league.
I mean,
I'm just saying that those are facts.
People are gonna yell out after hearing that. It's like,
those are facts, though.
Facts are facts. No printer.
And we've said it, like they followed the rules to build that roster and to do it, but maybe the rules need to change.
So are you so before when we were talking about this topic, we were kind of, thinking, hey, well, not thinking, but you were mentioning that the GMs probably don't like it. We weren't really putting our opinions, or at least you weren't putting your opinions out to this. Do you feel the rules should change?
I do.
Okay.
But I'm in saying that though, I'm not accusing Vegas of anything wrong. I say, chapeau for exploiting the rules in your favor. I mean, that's literally what every team who has someone related to cap compliance in their front office, which is probably basically every front office nowadays, like that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to maximize the team you can build under the rules in place. That's exactly what Vegas has done. Every single transaction they've made has been improved by NHL Central Registry. There's nothing wrong with Vegas's approach. What's wrong is that the rules allow it to happen. If that makes sense. Like this is not me dragging. Like, I don't think that the Golden Knights, you might think of them as villains. I think of them as a really well-run organization that have done an awesome job and have shown a lot of guile in building a team. I just think that there's got to be a way that they can't. It's just tough to get to the playoffs and see them icing that team. Like, that's not including their scratches. That's just who was in the lineup. So, like, and look who's done the scoring in the games, right? I think Hannafin had a goal. Hurdle's been scoring.
Hannafin scored his first goal of the
scoring.
playoffs. Yep. Hannafin, Hurdle, Stone,
So two of the guys they were able to get while being an LTIR was Stone, who comes off LTIR in the first day of the playoffs. I mean, it's just,
I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't have a problem with them changing the rule. Because at the end of the day, this is something.
This isn't just Vegas, though. Chicago won a cup with this. Tampa won a cup with this. Vegas is the latest incarnation where they've really bent it in their favor.
Absolutely, and that's.
But they didn't invent this strategy. They've just probably perfected it. Would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's why I have a hard time getting up for this, because Vegas is not the first team to take advantage of this. They're not the only team that could take advantage of this. They're just doing it better than everybody. And everyone else who cheers for teams that don't have that same mindset that Vegas has, apparently, it's easy to get upset at them. Like, to see people get mad at the players who Vegas landed at the trade deadline doing work for them in the playoffs, it's like, well, sorry, but your general manager has to do the work to get those types of players onto their team. And to, if you're not selling winning, what are you selling, CJ?
Hope.
Yeah, it's on those other teams to do that. Like, I'm sorry, Vegas all of a sudden is a desirable destination with everything that it has going on, and they're a winning team. Hell yeah, they're going to get players. Hell yeah, people are going to want to go there.
It still doesn't feel right to have just the 20 players dressed in a game be $4 million more than the cap, or almost $4 million more than the cap. Like, it just doesn't.
What are you going to do? Regulate? Right. Just, I don't know, man. I just think it's just like that part of that whole thing. Again, I don't have any.
I'll tell you, there are 20 plus GMs that agree with the spirit of what I'm saying. Maybe not exactly what I'm saying.
Fine.
But I think that there's a significant number of people in the league with sway that don't love it. Again, it's not just Vegas. Other teams are doing this, have attempted to do this. But like, I think that there's a feeling that there has to be a rule that extends somehow to the playoffs to keep, like, if we're going to have a supposedly level playing field, the rules have to make sure the playing field is level.
So let's talk about it. So we did mention this on the last episode, but like, let's dive into this a little bit further if we can. Even though this isn't something that's probably going to change until 2026, that's when the next CBA is up. What does a level playing field look like? Like, what's the ideal solution for this to not be replicated again, where there is a level playing field? Do you institute a salary cap for the playoffs? Is that it? Is it as simple as that?
It's not that simple, because as the season goes along, you build cap space if you're not over the cap. And so you could get to the playoffs. Just follow me in theory. Yeah. And actually be able to ice a roster that has like well above the cap ceiling, because you do build cap space for the days in the season where you're under the cap. So I don't know. This is, quite honestly, I think the reason the NHL first rebuffed this discussion a couple of years ago is because there really isn't an easy solution. Like, it's easy for you and I to toss something out on a podcast, like just throw out an idea at the top of our heads, but the actual way the cap is calculated every single day of the regular season makes it complex to try to enforce that in the playoffs. And then obviously, in theory, you could get to a spot where we get to the biggest games of the season and a team only has the cap space to dress 15 skaters or something. And then we might sit here and say, well, was that really the best fair thing either? So I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like just because it's hard doesn't mean you should sit here and say, well, this is totally fine, because it just, in Dallas, it's such a great season. Like, were they 1 point away from winning the President's Trophy?
Like, they're the number one seed in the West. Like
drawing Vegas is a bad bounce for them. That being said, look it.
But they have a good team. Like, it's on them to beat
10 minutes in the wrong direction. And here,
no, it's fine that we're at that point.
It's like we missed the turn out of town, and now we're like heading to a totally different town. But
welcome to the CJ show. We take weird ass turns and drive through cornfields on occasion. But like, at the same time, Dallas, it's not like Dallas sat the whole season and didn't do anything to build up their team either. They also made moves at the deadline too. Like, I mean, not
Yeah,
the
they
same
didn't have
incentives as
$87 million
Vegas.
worth of skaters in game 2, though.
You're absolutely right. They did not do that. But like the Dallas Stars are a really good team. And they've been building that team for a while. Like they should not be down 2-0. Or
We should just go back to my ultimate solution for all of this and eliminate the cap.
yeah.
I mean, in a world where there's no cap, there's discussions like this in a playoff series. You know, Team X spends $100 million and Team Y that they're playing spends $72 million. Is that? But like, at least then, like, there's only the illusion of fairness, I suppose, in the NHL system.
Because what about like a luxury tax system, like what the NBA has? Is that something that could be applicable in the NHL?
Well, I think it would work. I mean, the idea is that the teams that spend into the luxury tax, that money's redistributed among the less wealthy teams in the league, presumably not just so their owners can take nicer vacations, but so the owners of those lesser market teams can actually spend that on players or building out their staff or whatever it is to improve their operation. I think that would work. But, you know, obviously it was a hard won 2004-05 lockout. It cost the NHL an entire season. What the owners won in that was a pretty much impenetrable salary cap that I don't think the players are going to be able to repeal. So, but I mean, the truth is whenever we get in these arguments, it's like, or debates, not that we're arguing at all, but I just think that the truth is if there was no salary cap, there wouldn't be this problem.
Okay. I'll try to veer us back onto the main road after all of that. Did you see anything?
Take a left at Coburg and you'll hit Baltimore.
Baltimore? Really? It's not that close.
There's a little town outside Coburg called Baltimore.
Oh.
Okay, take a left and you'll hit Gore's Landing.
Okay, Gore's Landing. Okay, there's a
Or
Baltimore.
Cold Springs.
I like that, Baltimore. I think of the fact there's a town called Mexico in New York State, like more often than I should. It's just one of those weird things where you see like random towns with all these names. Anyway.
It was confusing as a kid. I was like,
yeah.
the Baltimore Orioles and Baltimore is this like little podunk, you know.
They play there?
There's an arena there too. I played some minor hockey. Anyway, all right. I've taken us on a second wrong turn out of town. Now we are in Baltimore, Ontario, folks.
Okay, yeah. I don't know what
There's a
the hell
speed
this
trap
place
there.
is.
Make sure you don't drive too fast. The police are always there speed trapping you.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's exactly what I need. Driving through Baltimore, Ontario, looking out for the police. Anyway.
If you ever have Coburg Papa sitting shotgun with you driving through Baltimore, he'll always remind you to slow down at this one spot.
You know what? Having Coburg Papa in the car with me while driving through Baltimore, Ontario, avoiding speed traps, that might actually help my case. Okay, let's talk about Utah. Did you see any of the événements, as we would say in French, going on in Utah yesterday? The players getting to meet some of the fans, Liam O'Brien, indulging fans to call him spicy tuna. They all packed into the Delta Center. That's where the new Utah team, still without a name, will be playing games as of next season. What did you think of all of that?
I mean, look, it was quite a showing. It's hard to miss the enthusiasm that the people of Salt Lake and from Utah more broadly brought to that event. You know, you got kids there. You got a packed house. You know, I think it's a really encouraging sign. In addition to all the season ticket deposits that team has taken in since the sale and relocation of the hockey assets of the former Coyotes was finalized a week or so ago. You know, it was pretty neat. And, you know, it was impossible also to miss Andre Trigny saying that might have been his best day in the NHL. You know what I mean? And this is someone who's been a head coach for a couple of years in Arizona, who was prior to that an assistant coach in the league. You know, him saying that, it tells you something. I think it's important, actually. I think he's a great coach. And you know, it wasn't so long ago I was in Arizona and he seemed he was put in a tough spot. He was the one person from the organization who had to speak every day once the rumors had started. I think there was certainly a time where he had a vacuum of information about what was going on. You know, he was put in a difficult spot and didn't seem in the best of moods about it. And then here he is a week later and the sun's come out over the mountains in Utah. They have an owner, I think, that's going to guide the team in a much more productive fashion than Alex Morello ever did in Arizona. And there's a lot of hope for them. And so what an exciting time. You know, there's still, the concerns I have are still the concerns. Like you see the arena, how the ice looks. It's kind of weird at the ends. Like there's a lot of work to be done in Delta Center. I think they've got 3 or 4 year plan to get that building way more hockey specific and get it to 16 or 17,000 seats that can all see the ice. So it's gonna be a bit of a make do project for the next little while there. But I mean, what was all of Arizona's tenure but a make do project? It's not this one does seem to have a little bit more optimism around it starting, and having a full building will be nice, having the support of the community, which it seems they do. And, happier days for those that survived the Mullet Arena experience in terms of players and staff on the Coyotes that seem to be pretty pumped with their new digs.
Someone should make a shirt that says, "We survived the Mullet Arena days." I'd wear that shirt.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What'd you think of the NHL Utah established 2024? They had like very basic gray hoodies that, I get it. They don't have a logo yet. They don't have a name. Like they're it's sort of like the PWHL vibe, right? Like you're trying to rep your city, but they don't yet have like the full kits available just yet.
I don't know if it's because of how the PWHL has seen the success, even though none of their teams have names. Maybe that's changed my mind, but like, I'm okay with them being as basic as they can. I still would like for them to have a proper name of some sort. I've already kind of let it be known that I'm okay with Utah Hockey Club, but like, okay, all right, you need some time to figure this stuff out. I believe they're going to do a bracket with 8 possible names to determine who's going to actually come out on top with the name for this team. Like, it's going to take time. Like when the Winnipeg Jets were getting themselves sorted in 2011. Don't you remember what Mark Scheifele looked like at the draft? Don't you remember his jersey at the draft? Yeah. A generic black NHL jersey. Like it takes time for teams to figure this stuff out.
Well, and that was a May 31st sale, and the draft would have been June 20 something. So like that was literally 3 weeks later. There was no way to turn. But the thing is, the Jets are always going to be the Jets again. Like there was no other way. Utah, I got to say, I don't really like any of the names that have been trademarked, but I do. I've talked myself into HC Utah. Like I actually think that's kind of cool. So, I mean, it's funny. I tweeted that yesterday. I just got ratioed. Like people think I'm nuts. Like more people think I'm nuts for backing HC Utah than not liking whatever Blizzard or Yetis or whatever. But I found all the names ice, like just didn't.
Ice sucks.
Mammoth.
I don't mind Mammoth, but like ice sucks. Fury sucks. Venom doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, honestly, those names are giving off like 90s vibes. Like, I know that everything that's old is new again, but like it feels like we're going back to like the Mighty Ducks era or something. Like anyway, doesn't matter. They're not naming the team for me, and I'm not buying a jersey either way. So like whatever the people decide, I'll live with, and I'm not actually trying to rain on their parade. It's too bad that none of the names really pop for me.
Outlaws?
I mean, I can live with it.
Actually, one other thing.
I'm going to have to live with it. Who cares?
We're all going to have to live with it. One other thing I want to bring up. You mentioned Mighty Ducks vibes. Does that mean you're pro or against Mighty Ducks as a name?
Well, I have to say pro because I was pro in like 93 when they named it, and I loved the movie and I was a kid, and like, but they named that team for kids, right? And Disney owned the team at the time, and they put it like I get it. And then they dropped the Mighty and they became the Ducks, and it's all good. Like, look at it's. I just think that HC Utah, I've really talked myself into, because I'm like, in the absence of a good name, like why not do something a little different, a little nod to other sports? They've already got Real Salt Lake in the MLS, also owned by Ryan and Ashley Smith. Mm-hmm. It's kind of playing off that idea, so. I don't know if that's going to win the bracket. I heard the kids were cheering Utah Yetis when they arrived yesterday. So
there are some grown folk who like Yetis too.
Yeah, but I mean, if that's what resonates with kids, it's all about building the next generation up in Utah. So have at it. It's good to see. It really is good to see. In all seriousness, the enthusiasm there, and I think the team. I mean, that's going to be essential. You can't go to another place where it's tough to sell tickets right out of the gate.
Yeah. I can live with Yetis. It's funny because I was banging the drum for Utah HC. I won't say I've talked myself into the Utah Yetis being a thing, but I wouldn't be as disgusted compared to Fury or Venom or Ice being the name of the
All
team.
right, so those are the three you say it can't be.
Yeah, I don't think it could be those teams. If it's Mammoth, Blizzard, or Yetis, I'll be like, okay, all right. Utah HC, I'll laugh at everybody who thought, oh, it's just a bland, stupid name. Well, look, it's the name of the team. But yeah, if it's Yetis, it's fine. It's okay. It's a serviceable name. I just want to see what the jerseys look like. We'll all change our mind about the names if the jerseys and the logo look fire. Like, no one's going to care that the name is the Yetis or whatever if the jersey scheme is amazing. I'm convinced of that.
I'm buying what you're selling.
But you don't buy jerseys, though.
No, but I'm buying your point here. I'm like, I think you're raising good points.
I appreciate
You're doing good things, young Julian.
You too, young CJ. Anyway, do we want to get to stick taps? I think now's a good time for stick taps.
Sure.
I have one. Or do you want to go first? You go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to give my stick tap to Jeremy Swayman.
Oh,
I got to say, I have really liked his swagger in this series. He gave an interview to Kyle Bukauskas after game one where he talked about, because in the last couple seasons, he, didn't get put into the playoff mix out of the gate. And, he said, like, it's about time I started game one. He played a hell of a game that night. Really solid again in game three. Like, he's another good young goaltender. Got to point out, he's American. Like, the U.S. has got some players at that position. And as we go into this best on best season, I'm not sure that Swayman is quite on that radar just yet, just because you have the Hellebucks that are established, the Ottingers, the Demkos. But, man, the U.S. looks stacked at that goaltending position. Anyway, just stick tack to Jeremy Swayman, who seems like a great teammate with his partner Linus Hallmark, and it does appear to be his moment right now. And tip of the cap for I like his vibe. I just like he's got that je ne sais quoi, and that's what you want in a goaltender. I think you need goaltender's job is to stop the puck, but also to give his team confidence, and he's doing both of that so far to start these playoffs.
I love that. And yeah, you're right. He has shown off that swagger, and hey, it's resulted in 2 wins for him so far in this series. While we are on the theme of goaltending, we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge in some way the incredible save that Sergei Bobrovsky made earlier this week, and that's why he's deserving of my stick tap. What an amazing save. I don't want to hear producer Drew go on about how Matthew Dumba could have slid the puck underneath and blah, 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 whatever. Dude, when in those situations, you're just trying to whack at the puck. You're just trying to put the puck in the net. What Sergei Bobrovsky did, considering the circumstances, was all world. I think it's the best save of the playoffs. Easily.
Dude, it's like the best save of the last 5 years. And maybe longer. It's funny. I had this debate with Mark Masters at the rink on Wednesday, and he was saying because there was an element of luck to it, which is undeniable, that it shouldn't be considered the best save. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like,
what?
Like he was galaxy braiding it because there was another pretty big save in that game where Bobrovsky extended his left pad and really held the post, and like it was an awesome save. And he was saying that one required like more technical skill and should be thought of as a better save. And I'm like, dude, if you were twisting yourself into a pretzel trying to make that argument, you're missing the forest for the trees. Like the battle level, not giving up on the play, doing anything he can to get his body in front of it. Obviously, you don't teach that technique, but I mean, this is what we celebrate. Guys like Dominic Hasek would make those kind of saves. Not saying he made that exact save where it's just like acrobatic and doing anything to stop it. I mean, let's not overthink it. You just watch that. Like you just show that to someone who doesn't even know hockey and they're going to be like, wow, that was a wow moment. That's probably the wow moment of the first like week of the playoffs, I would say.
I agree. Like Sergei
There's been some nice goals, but that's a wow moment.
Sergei Bobrovsky had his back to the play. Like as that's forming, he's literally turning his back to the play and hoping that like some limb of his gets that puck, and it does. And then you see him sprawling into his own net. Like that's an incredible save.
They should put it on a postage stamp. Like that thing.
It should.
Like you could have like a screen grab, like a sort of like just a still photo of that. That would be unreal.
Sergei Bobrovsky, worthy of a stick tap. You are back on the case, sir. It's something about this guy between last year and this year where we kind of wrote him off as a guy, and now he's showing that he is super valuable in the postseason. I'm telling you, if he goes on another deep run, we have to make the Hall of Fame case for Sergei Bobrovsky. I'm putting it out there. We might have
two
to.
Vezinas.
Yes, he does. He has 2 Vezinas, and
he might get in. He might get in based on that and his longevity. Like, I don't know where he's at with career wins, but as long as he keeps winning, like obviously a Stanley Cup or a Conn Smythe trophy, that pretty much seals it. But I think he's making the case already, bud.
2 Vezina trophies and 2 of the biggest upsets in modern day NHL history. He was the goalie for when Columbus knocked off Tampa Bay in 2019 in like 4 games. He was the goalie of record for them that won that series. Boston losing to Florida last year. Sergei Bobrovsky ended up being the guy to get them through that series. Come on, guys. Anyway, we're back on Monday. Get your questions in now. Discord.
It's hard for goalies to get in the Hall. I should say that, though.
It absolutely is, but we're going to get to a point where, like, you know, guys like Henrik Lundqvist and Carey Price will, you know, they'll be there. Doesn't matter. Get your questions in now. Monday, we'll get to them on Ask CJ. Use the hashtag AskCJ if you can. We'd really appreciate it. And just continue to follow CJ's work at The Athletic. He'll continue to cover this Leafs-Bruins series, and on Monday, we'll be sure to talk about what happens in Game 4. CJ, talk to you soon on Monday.
Appreciate you, brother.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK and McKenzie.